Good afternoon, and you are?
I am Reverend Frederick H. Lagarde Jr. I am the current pastor of the Community Baptist Church of Love here in Paterson, New Jersey.
And how long have you been pastor of Community Baptist Church of Love?
I have been pastoring the church since 1999. Just 2 years prior to my father's passing, I took the church over.
And your father was?
My father was Reverend Frederick H. Lagarde Sr., who was the former pastor of this church, the founder of our Christian school that we operate here, and a very close and personal friend to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as well as Rosa Parks and others.
And how has your family been involved in the history of Paterson as far as the African American communities or communities as a whole?
Okay, we've actually been involved not only in just the African American community, but if we speak particularly with the African American community, my father particularly has made great contributions to the African American community here in the city of Paterson. Um, Number one, namely being the one who did bring Dr. King to the city just a short time before his passing. Not only that, but he also brought Rosa Parks here to twice. Ralph Abernathy also spoke from the very same pulpit that Dr. King spoke from. My father also is accredited and founded the first black and owned operated private Christian school here in the city of Paterson in 1983 with 11 students. And today we have well over 150 students, and that school is still operational from pre-K through the 8th grade. And we are celebrating now, we're in our 27th year of service to the community. So he's made great contributions to the African American community, but also my dad was always one that sought to bring down and break the racial barriers, knowing that we are all brothers and sisters in Christ. And one of the things my father always used to say is that we are our brother's keeper, and the way we treat people is the way that we treat God.
And in doing all of this, was your father, Reverend Lagarde Sr., ever signaled out or depicted as being something of a rebel in this city?
Yes, he was considered as a rebel of the city. In fact, if you were to look in my offices now, you would see there are articles from him being arrested right here in this city for leading riots and protests. The mayor at that time in the 60s, when he first came to Paterson, had him arrested for protesting, and leading various protests. He was always a rebel, but, if you're going to be a rebel, you ought to be a rebel with a cause, and not just any cause, but a positive cause. So he was definitely a rebel. He was a trailblazer, and he had a cause, and he had a reason to be so.
What are some of the things growing up that you remember that your father did that you actually saw and you learned from?
Well, I can tell you, I remember growing up, and although when Dr. King came to Paterson in '68, I was not yet born, I still enjoy the stories and have enjoyed the privilege of being the son of the individual who did bring him to Paterson. But speaking from my own personal experience, one of the things that I saw my father do in growing up was fight very, very hard to get even the Broadway that sits in front of this building that everyone drives up and down, named Dr. Martin Luther King Way. He fought very hard with the city council and many people. My dad is actually an unsung hero. My dad was a very modest man, and he never sought to be elevated or sought the limelight. And many people don't realize that when they hit Paterson and drive down this main thoroughfare that this building sits on, that the reason why it's named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Way is because my father fought hard to have that done. He did not just want one little side street named after Dr. King. But when you're dealing with someone that broke down racial barriers and did great things, worldwide, nationwide, Nobel Peace Prize winner, he felt like it should be a main thoroughfare named after him. I also saw my father bring Rosa Parks here and fought very hard to have the Rosa Parks Fine and Performing Arts School here on 12th Ave named the Rosa Parks Fine and Performing Arts School, as well as the senior citizens apartments. So he fought hard for things like that. He was always a fighter for the underdog. He always sought to bring people up as he went up. He sought to bring others up. Many of us, there are many that enjoy a crabs in the barrel mentality. If we're not rising, we don't want anyone else to rise. But my father always sought to bring others up with him. And as he did that, he realized that it was nothing in and of himself, but he always gave God the glory for everything, that he was able to accomplish.
What do you think, or who is the inspiration or the mentor behind your father that gave him all of this motivation to do these things? How did that come about?
Well, I would actually say I believe my father's motivation came from his father, who is the Reverend Dr. Floville Albert Lagarde. He is actually the founder of the Community Baptist Church. And just to say a little about my grandfather was from the West Indies, from the Virgin Islands, the island of St. John. He came here to, New Jersey. And prior to founding this church, he was the pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church in Garfield, where Dr. Calvin McKinney is now the pastor. And coincidentally, Dr. McKinney is a son of this church. He grew up in this church and was ordained and installed from this church into Calvary. But I say that to say this. My grandfather was a trailblazer in and of himself. What led him to begin this church that we sit in today was because even back in the 50s, when this church started, he was an innovator. And there were things in the religious realm that he could not freely flow in the church he was currently in. And so that led him to come and start this work, which we now see as a continued work today. He was a fighter. He was a perseverer. You're talking about a man that started a church at 249 Hamilton Avenue here in the city of Paterson in a house with 11 members. And within 2 years, they had purchased and acquired where Bethel AME is now, 2-4 Auburn Street, which was our home until 1986. My grandfather fought hard to achieve those things. And so I think my father coming up in a strict household, seeing his father fight for things and going to a bank back in that time and the banker telling them, we can't give you a loan. You haven't been around long enough, and it may even have been racially motivated. But to have my grandfather tell the bank the same God that put you in charge of this money can take it from you and get that loan. And then for the church to, within 2 years of receiving the loan, burn the mortgage on 2-4 Auburn Street, our former location. Those things motivated my father. So his father was his motivation.
And what were some of the things that your father spoke to you about? Father and sons have talks. Son, this is what I want you to do. What were some of these things that your father said to you?
Well, one of the biggest things that my father always said to me, and not only to me, but I have 3 sisters, Francine, Francella, and my oldest sister's Frederica. He put this in all of us. He was one for integrity. And he always, would put in us, when you go out and you represent, make sure that you represent with integrity. He told us to never, let where we came from stop us from where we could go. There's this cloud over the city of Paterson, And you tell people, you go to some other towns and suburban areas and you tell people you're from Paterson, they flinch, not even realizing the rich heritage and legacy of this city that we live in. And what I often tell people is, and what we were always taught, is never be ashamed of where you come from, because it's not where you come from, but it's where you're going to. And so I'm not ashamed at all to be from the city of Paterson. I'm not ashamed to reside here to this day. And many times, there's a focus on our ghetto areas, or our areas where we have crime and violence, but that's not the full Paterson. That's not the full Paterson. There are other things of Paterson, like the Great Falls, like 2-4 Auburn Street, where Dr. King came. There are other things like the silk industry, and Paterson, I believe, is getting ready to rise back to the top. And, as Apostle Rudolph, who's the pastor of Christian Fellowship Center here in Paterson, stated, we believe that this city again is going to be a city of righteousness. So we're definitely not ashamed, and we've never been ashamed of where we've come from. And that was what our Father always told us. Don't be ashamed of where you come from. Always be proud of who you are. And we've always been proud. Although I'm a light hue, I am still African American. We come in different shades. And he said, always be proud of who you are. So I'm proud to be an African American. I'm proud to be who I am. I'm proud to be a Patersonian. And so that's what we've been taught.
And joining these two historic legacies, these two historic buildings, how do you think that is going to take the city forward and even bring back the history that's missing here?
Well, I think the way it has how it's going to take the city forward is by this. Number one, I believe that we're coming back and we have a new administration now, and I believe that even the new administration that is in office has a desire for the people of Paterson and for the people outside of Paterson to understand the richness of Paterson, and the coming together of these two locations and this designation is going to be a great thing for this city, because what it's going to do is it's going to take focus off of what everyone normally focuses on about this city and cause them to realize that, wow, Paterson is still a diamond, but right now we're just a diamond in the rough. We just need to be polished off and brought back up to speed, and we're going to do that.
Now, I know that you weren't born when Dr. King came here, but I'm sure you've heard first-hand stories, second-hand stories, and stories that are unwritten about that day. What do you recall?
Okay. Well, the main story that I remember, and again, I've been so privileged to grow up in the house, of my father, who brought him here. But the story that I always remember and that he would always tell us was, how they waited for hours for Dr. King, and I can hear him always talking about the crowd and the excitement of the crowd, and how people were just lined up, and how folk cried, and people cried when he came in, and how when he spoke, people were moved to tears because he gave them hope. He gave them hope that, they didn't have at that time, and, that's what I remember most is just the lines and the crowds and, people just waiting and just being poised and, at the edge to hear what Dr. King had to say, to them. Because although, they were up here in the north at that time, and many came from the south because they felt like there were better opportunities in the north, we have to understand that there was segregation here in the north too. People were still not receiving equal opportunities up here in the north too. So, you had a disenfranchised people at that time that needed some hope. And that's what Dr. King came with. And he came with the hope and the message that they can move forward that they needed.
And how was it that your father was able to be instrumental in bringing Dr. King to Paterson?
Well, again, as I told you, he was a personal friend of Dr. King's. My father's work actually started on the campuses of Virginia Union University, where he graduated from divinity school. My father, before pastoring here in this city, was pastoring in Edenton, North Carolina, the Providence Baptist Church of Edenton, North Carolina. My father came to pastor this church at the passing of his father and the call from this church to come and take the church over. My father knew Dr. King back in his days of Virginia Union University, Edenton, North Carolina, when he pastored there. And so they had become very close. My father was the founder of the first SCLC chapter in Edenton, North Carolina. My father worked with Reverend James Bevel. In fact, the very same Sunday that the church in Birmingham was bombed and the 4 little girls were killed, Dr. James Bevel was in Edenton, North Carolina, prepared to preach for my father that Sunday, and they got the news and left Edenton to go to Birmingham. So my father had a connection. He had just a connection from working with the SCLC, from working with James Bevel, from knowing Dr. King from his days of Virginia Union, that caused them to have a friendship. It was a friendship that he didn't, brag about or tell many about. So when it came to bringing him to Paterson, my father had a direct personal phone connection with him and was able to do it because they had a friendship. And so he was able to just call him up and say, listen, this is what's going on in the city that I'm in now. And we need you to come up here, and we need some hope. We need some healing. And he was able to get him to come.
What was going on in Paterson around that time?
Well, like I said, I wasn't here at that time. But what I understand was going on at that time was, people, again, as I said, they were disenfranchised. Yes, there were jobs, but you still had situations where those of other ethnic hues or tones or colors were making more. And you had people in positions, African-American people, that were qualified to do just what the Caucasian or the other race was able to do, but being paid less than what they were worth. And they were disenfranchised. They wanted more. They wanted better. Yes, was Paterson in better shape as far as our streets were cleaner then and less crime then? Yes, but there were economic issues going on then. And they were needing, to people to understand that, they were just worth just as much as the person of another ethnic hue was.
So when your father came to Paterson, was this something new that he saw? Had this been something normal that he saw in the South? Did he see this city of Paterson any different than any other city?
Well, as I told you, as I told you, and I will repeat myself, as I said before, many came to the North for better opportunities, but there was racism here. Let me go a little further. The only difference up here was, the racism was a little downplayed, a little covered up, whereas when you were in the South, it was just there. It was out there, My father used to tell me when he was in North Carolina, he recalled one story. I recall one story of him telling me how he was chased in a car. He was driving across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and with Ku Klux Klan in a car behind him shooting at his car. My father could tell you about the crosses burned in his backyard in North Carolina. And I think I heard a gentleman or someone say, who was just interviewed prior to me, about even how the Ku Klux Klan, begin to infiltrate and come up to the North. That lets you know there was racism here. It was just a little downplayed. So did he see it any differently? Yes. It was a little calmer the way it was here, but it was still racism here as it was in the South as well.
What did he do to change that? What were some of the things that he did in bringing Dr. King here? And even before he brought Dr. King here, what are some of the things that he wanted to change in Paterson?
Well, did he want to change, or what did he do to?
What did he want to do, and what did he do?
Well, he wanted to see people be more financially empowered. One of the things my father did when he first came to Paterson is where, if you go to the old site now, you see a parking lot. But before there was a parking lot, there used to be a house next to the church, and it was called the House of Action. Okay, it was called the House of Action. And what happened in the House of Action was people could come there who were looking for jobs. People could come there who were looking, to have better living environments or to come off of welfare, and they could receive help. They could receive help from finding a job, to finding a better living environment, to finding food if they needed it. There was a pantry operated there, and those are things that he did here in the city to try to change the city. The biggest thing he did came later on, in years later, when he started the school here, because he saw our children not being educated properly by the public school system. All of us are aware that the public school system has been under state takeover for several years, but I maintain, and he maintained, and most will maintain, that there's not been improvement. There's not been improvement. And now with the bringing in of new administration on the state level and a new governor, we now see him taking money from public education. And so my father saw a decline even before the state came in and said, listen, I have to do something and give the people, not just black children, but Spanish children, white children, whatever children wanted to come, an opportunity at a better education. And that's why he founded the first, yes, it was black owned and operated, but it definitely was not just catering to the blacks. Even today, we have Hispanic children in our school. We have children that are mixed with Asian and black in our school. So that was really what he did to change the city. We used to have a community development corporation. If you ride down Governor Street, and you'll see houses that sit to the back of the old church. We built those houses. We empowered people, and we built some other homes too. And so he sought to do things like that because he just believed that everybody just deserved to live in decency and with some respect and with some dignity.
And the historic preservation
Mm-hmm.
of 2 Auburn Street, which I'm sure you grew up in. You
Yes.
probably sang in the choir.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
That means everything to me, because although Bethel AME Church matriculates and worships in that building now, that will forever to us be Community Baptist Church. It will forever be Community Baptist Church. I could still today go to that building, and I would be able to walk you through every room in that building. I could walk you through. I still could know every turn in that building, and it's long overdue. The very fact that you can speak to people still today and they not know that Dr. King even came to Paterson lets us know that it's long overdue. There are people that don't even know that he was ever here, and they need to know that story. And so that historic preservation is necessary. It's vital. It's crucial. And while, as I say again, Bethel AME is currently residing in that building, we still, as this church, we claim, all right, the rights to bringing Dr. King to the city. I still have members in my congregation who were here, who sat in the sanctuary when he came. All right. So they claim the building, but I claim the membership and the people that were instrumental in bringing him to the city.
And I know in that church, the same pulpit's there, the
Yes.
same stained glass windows, and there is even a picture in color of Christ on that pulpit that is the same. How do you propose, as a minister, as a legacy of a legacy, to keep that going, to keep alive?
Well, let me say this just coincidentally about the picture of Christ. If you see pictures if you see pictures of Dr. King in the pulpit with Christ behind him, at that time it was a Caucasian depiction of Christ. Some years later, my father had an artist go up on scaffolds and color the face in. It was not always depicted as a Christ of color. But some years later, my father had someone go up and color the face, and not because we believe so much there's a black or white Christ, but my father did that because we subscribe to what the Bible says. And the description in the Bible talks about Christ being of skin of copper and hair of lamb's wool. So he depicted to have, he endeavored, excuse me, to have that Christ resemble what the Bible says. All right. And so it's so funny because it was not always like it is now. Coincidentally, the very piano that was in the sanctuary at 2-4 Auburn Street rests in the vestibule of our church right now. The very piano my grandmother played, and I'm sure was played on the day that Dr. King came, rests in the vestibule of our sanctuary now. As far as what are we going to do to keep this alive, we're going to do what we have been doing, and that is every January we're going to come together. For the last over 20 years, you know, we've had the largest gathering to commemorate Dr. King and Dr. King's birthday. In fact, this church started the first commemoration ceremonies. Now other churches are doing it in Paterson now, but we were the first church, and we're going to continue to do that. And we want to continue to encourage our young people to learn about their heritage and to learn where they come from, to learn and to understand that they don't come from sagging pants and foul and musty odors, and they don't come from holding their crouch and bopping on the streets and being scantily dressed. That's not what they come from. They come from a rich heritage, and the way we continue to do that is by having these services in January, by continuing to operate this school, which we educate our children here definitely on Black history. When my children come in the morning, they have to do 3 pledges. One is to the American flag, one is to the Christian flag, and one is to the flag of the Black American. They must do those pledges, and we do them together every morning. And so that's the way that we're going to continue to, you know, educate and keep this alive.
As a young pastor, not only involved in history, not only about history, how does it make you feel to know that your church now will be an important part of history?
Well, it of course overwhelms us with joy. But what we also acknowledge is we acknowledge God, okay? We just say to God be the glory, because we just believe that this designation, we believe that everything that's happening here in the city, the shift in government, even what's happening here today, we don't believe that anybody, no one but God could bring this together. Yes, the inspiration was given to Brother Richardson and others who have assisted him, but we just say to God be the glory. It's a wonderful thing. We're happy about it, you know, and we're just thankful to God for what he's doing.
And how would you finish this sentence? Paterson is a great city. It's been known for its silk. It has great buildings. It has great history. Now it has a great legacy. How would you finish that?
Now it has a great legacy, and we as Patersonians and those that have a vested interest in the city of Paterson must preserve and maintain the legacy. It's one thing to have a legacy, but it's another thing to preserve and maintain it. You can plant a flower, you can plant a seed in the ground, but unless you do what's necessary to cause it to come forth and flourish after it comes forth, it will die. And so unless we do what's necessary to maintain and to water the legacy and to grow the legacy and to keep it alive, it will die.
And how do you plan to do that?
I plan to do that the best way I can, and that's to, like I told you, continue to move in the ministries that this church has, continue to reach out to the community. And, you know, the role of a pastor, it is a challenging role. But one great thing is we have the pulpit, and it's our platform, and much can be done from the pulpit. And so I just continue to, you know, feed my people and feed the people of the city through the school, through the church, and we go outside of these doors as well. We're endeavoring now, with the recent killing that's just occurred on Sunday morning here in the city, to really within the next few weeks, shut down that area where that killing happened and take the church out there to the people, because that's what's not happening. We have become so concerned with the people we already have inside of the building, while there's a lost generation and they're going to hell because no one is offering them any hope. And so we endeavor to do that. And we endeavor to tell our drug dealers that while they may be dealing drugs, they are still sons of a Most High God, and they still are sons of African ancestors, and they have a rich legacy and heritage, and they need to embrace it.
Thank you.
Thank you.